Greetings to my online learners and welcome to chapter 18 and the last of the series of this class. So what we're going to look at today is reproduction, the reproductive system, and how the body just replaces and repairs itself. There are two types of reproduction. There's asexual reproduction, which is the process of mitosis, and cells that are damaged will get replaced. This is cells making an exact copy of themselves, and it's essential to maintain a healthy body. But in cellular reproduction, you actually have a bit of variation. And in the process of sexual reproduction, you have variation because you have a new combination of the genetic material. And this helps with the propagation of the human race. So a brief review. When we look at tissue growth and replacement, this is a process of mitosis. In mitosis, you have cells making exact copies of themselves, and you get one cell that makes two copies. And it's asexual in the fact that the organism doesn't need any sort of other organism, and it just involves cellular replication. When we talk about DNA, DNA comes in packages called chromosomes, and these chromosomes are where the material is found. Okay? In order to perpetuate the species, we need to have the process of meiosis. And the meiosis is a division where the genetic material divides in half, and because of that, there can be a different union of different genetic material, which provides a unique and different organism. In animals, females produce eggs, males produce sperm, and there's a generic name for that called gametes. And in humans, I'm not sure if you realize it, there are 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs. Half the pair comes from your mom, half the pair comes from your father. If it wasn't for the fact that these processes underwent meiosis and divided the cell genetic material in half, you'd get double that, and then that would double, and that would double. And when cells have too much genetic material, they don't know what to do with it, so they destroy themselves or abort. So when you look at the formation of an egg versus formation of sperm, it's a little different in the fact that eggs put all their cytoplasm into one egg, or females put all their cytoplasm into one egg. So if you look, let's look at the male first because it's a little easier. With the male, the cells divide evenly, and then each of those cells divide evenly, and you get 4 sperm of identical size. Now they have a little bit different genetic material in it because their combination of genetic material is a little different. With females, you have what's called an oocyte, and that divides with most of the cytoplasm going to one side, and the other becomes what's called a polar body. So usually it disintegrates and nothing comes of it. Then there's another division, and this second division is also unequal, leaving one large fertilized or unfertilized eggs and 2 polar bodies, because this one doesn't divide again. But that's just to show that humans, all their for the egg, all the cytoplasm goes into one, where with sperm, they're all kind of even. And they're not very big. Sperm aren't very big at all. When they take and you match your chromosomes, before genetic analysis, they used to do what's called a karyotype, where they would take pictures of your genes. So do an amniocentesis, take one cell, take pictures of all the chromosomes and line them up. And they were lined from largest to smallest. So here you can see this has 2 identical X chromosomes, where here you have a different X and a Y. So this is a male on this side, and this is a female on this side. So there's what's called 22 autosomal pairs, which control everything else, and then the 23rd pair controls the sex of the child or of the human. Okay, good. In a situation of this, in normal cell division, everything divides evenly. In some conditions where what's called trisomy number 21, so here's chromosome number 21, there will be a third copy of that, and that results in a disease called Down syndrome, or a condition called Down syndrome. Usually with the larger chromosomes, if they don't divide properly, the fetus will be aborted because it's too much information to be incorrect in the body. But in Down syndrome, it's only a small amount, and normally it happens in North America. Down's babies can live quite a relatively normal life, and it's because of trisomy number 21. Okay, and Down syndrome has a kind of a specific look of their eyes. Their tongue is larger, their face is smaller. Okay, let's look at the human life cycle. When we're looking at the human life cycle, mitosis and meiosis are absolutely necessary part of the human life. So you have cell replacement, you have repair, and then you also have the production of new organisms. Sperm and egg only contain half the chromosome numbers of the organism, and this is produced by the process of meiosis in what's called the gonads. And the gonads is a general name for the testes or the ovaries. Once the egg is fertilized, it is called a zygote, and a zygote again has 46 chromosomes back. Okay, here is a really complicated diagram to basically say eggs are big, have half the chromosomes of a normal cell. The sperm will fertilize it with the other half, and then you have the normal 46 chromosomes again. Then underneath, with the process of mitosis, these cells will grow and divide and then become an embryo, and poof, you have a real human again. I think it's absolutely amazing that two cells can come together to form an organism. Good. Now, when we look at it, reproductive organs are called genitalia. Now, there's the primary organs, and then there's just secondary organs. The primary organs are the organs that produce gonads, or sorry, the gonads that produce gametes. So that's testicles in a male and ovaries in a female. But there's also the secondary genitalia, which is sort of the other structures that look at it. So let's look at female first. Now, females have ovaries, and the ovaries will produce estrogen, and estrogen is the hormone that causes the secondary sex characteristics. So when you look at a female, and this looks quite large, but it really isn't that large until there's a baby growing inside of it. So here is the bladder, and sorry, here's the bladder here, and the uterus is above the bladder and between the rectum. So there's, you can't see in this diagram, but there's also a lot of intestines right above it. So in females, there are basically three pipes to the outside. There's the urethra for urine, there's the vagina for where menstrual fluid comes out and sperm enters, and then there's the anus for the removal of excrement. With males, there's only two openings because the penis and the urethra in the penis will transport both semen and urine, but not at the same time. We'll talk about that later. So notice that the ovaries are quite strongly bound to the side, but there is still an opening. They're not actually continuous with one. So in the ovaries is where the egg will develop, and the developing egg is called a follicle. And then it'll go through the fimbriae, are the edges of the oviduct, and then it goes through this tube, which is called the oviduct, or it's called the fallopian tubes, or it can also be called the uterine tubes, just to confuse things, just to give it lots of names. Okay? And then the egg hopefully will be fertilized in the uterine, the fallopian tubes, and then it implants in the endometrium and starts its growth. I just want to find the external one. Okay, so when we look at the external genitalia, and I know this isn't a pretty picture, but it's a good picture to show you the relationship and the other external parts. So on the front is what's called the mons pubis, and this is a fattier area to help cushion the rest of the area during intercourse, actually. Then you have the labia or the lips. So you have the major one, and then you have the minor, which are the ones inside. The head of the clitoris is here, and that is the sensitive spot. And they have the pupus on the outside. And in developmental biology, the pupus develops from the same tissue as the the foreskin of the penis. It's a little FYI. Then you have the vagina is the opening to the uterus. And the area between the anus and the vagina is called the perineum. And this is where there's a lot of tearing during childbirth. Another thing they talk about, but we don't go into too much detail with in the female, is the vestibular glands. And the vestibular glands release lubricant and fluid to help during intercourse, to help lubricate the area and keep it moist and easier for movement. Okay, so that's the female external genitalia. If we look at the internal genitalia, first off, the uterine tubes they look like long tubes, and they can be long depending on the organism. And they will join with the uterus themselves. So the uterus is in the abdomen. The uterus has 3 layers. The endometrium is the mucus layer where it builds up the cells which are later sloughed off in menstruation. The myometrium is the smooth muscles, which are very important in the contractions during labor and delivery. And then the perimetrium is just the outer layer, the visceral peritoneal, which helps in structure to keep the organ together. Okay. Endometriosis is a situation where the endometrial lining will escape, and it responds to hormonal changes and will cause damage in the other openings. Now, if you look at it, where is it? Oops, right here. So if we go back, you can see there's actually an opening here. This isn't sealed off like when we talk about the male. So the endometrial lining can actually escape this way, or the opposite way is as ovulation occurs, the egg will be picked up by the oviduct. It can also be put out into the abdomen, which can cause problems during development. Okay. We talked about the genitalia, a little bit about the breasts, just because they're significant when it comes to milk production. So there are ducts in the breast, and they will come out the nipple. Most of the breast is fatty tissue, though, just in case I'm working. Now, when we get into menstruation and ovulation, this is actually quite tricky, and it talks about the hormonal control. So let's look at it with a bit more detail. And I'm going to do that on the next slide because I'm running out of my 15 minutes. So we will look at the development later. See part 2.